All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're talking about a heist that's, well, it's just almost too absurd to be true. I mean, imagine stealing over $17 million dollars only to get caught because of a little celebratory dance and a question you asked your bank teller. Yeah, this is the story of the Loomis Fargo robbery, and it's basically the ultimate playbook on what not to do. So it all starts with this absolutely staggering amount of money, $17.3 million. And get this, most of it was in untraceable $20 bills. At the time, this was the second biggest cash heist in U.S. history. But it's not really the amount that makes this story so unforgettable. It's the unbelievable incompetence of the people who stole it. Seriously, this isn't just a crime story. It's more like a dark comedy. The series of blunders that followed the actual heist were so wild they forced the FBI into an international manhunt and, yep, even inspired a Hollywood movie. We're about to see how a supposedly perfect plan can unravel in the most spectacular and kinda hilarious way. So who was the guy at the center of all this? He wasn't some hardened criminal mastermind. Nope. He was just a frustrated supervisor. A regular guy who was pushed to the edge and was about to make a decision that would change his life and a lot of other lives forever. Okay, so at the heart of this whole thing is David Gant. He was a Gulf War veteran working as an armored car supervisor for Loomis Fargo. Think about this. He was literally surrounded by mountains of cash, handling millions of dollars every single day. But his own reality, a completely different story. He was working these insane 75 to 80-hour weeks for just over $8 an hour. You can just feel that frustration building, can't you? And that right there, was the spark that was about to light a massive fire. All that frustration and loneliness made him, well, it made him vulnerable. And that's exactly when two key people saw an opening. His former coworker, Kelly Campbell, and her buddy, Steve Chambers, started whispering in Gaunt's ear, planting this little seed of an idea, a seed that would grow into a plan to steal millions. And just like that, they cooked up a plan. On the surface, it seemed so simple, so straightforward, totally foolproof. But as we're about to find out, when greed is driving the car, you tend to overlook some pretty obvious potholes in the road. So here it is, the so-called master plan. It was simple. David would do all the dirty work. He'd stay late, load up the cash, then take a small cut, just 50 grand, to disappear down to Mexico. Meanwhile, Steve would just hang on to the rest of the millions until things cooled off. Then they'd all meet up and be rich. Seemed perfect. I mean, what could possibly go wrong? Well, here's the thing. There was this one massive, glaring flaw in their plan. A question that David, who was so blinded by this dream of a new life, just completely forgot to ask himself. He was trusting a small-time crook he barely knew to hold on to $17 million and just, what, give it back later out of the goodness of his heart? Yeah, that was a fatal miscalculation. So the night of October 4th, 1997 arrives. The stage is set. David Gaunt, our frustrated supervisor, walks into the Loomis Fargo vault one last time. Only this time, he's not an employee. He's a thief. And in a few short hours, he's about to become one of the most wanted men in America. So in this bizarre mix of surprising competence and just comical error, Gaunt actually pulls it off. He successfully loads over $17 million into a van. But he made one tiny, critical mistake. He missed a security camera. A camera that recorded everything, including a happy little dance that would soon become infamous. Before he was even out of the building, Gant had already left a perfect trail of breadcrumbs for the FBI. That camera he missed, it didn't just catch his face and his little jig, it also recorded him paging his buddies over and over, making it crystal clear from the get-go that he had help. All right, so while David is trying to lay low in a luxury resort down in Mexico, Steve Chambers was supposed to be guarding the money and, being discreet. Instead, he kicked off a spending spree of truly epic proportions, a spree that was literally impossible to ignore. Steve's lack of discretion was just astounding. He and his wife went from living in a mobile home to a mansion, practically overnight. They bought a brand new BMW, Rolex watches, the whole 9 yards. And then they started making these huge cash deposits at their local bank, all in $20 bills. Their neighbors noticed. The bank definitely noticed. It was a giant flashing red light. The amateur hour nature of this whole thing was just on full display at the bank. While she's depositing stacks of stolen 20s, Steve's wife, Michelle, literally asks the teller, How much can I deposit before you have to report it to the feds? It was, it was basically a confession right there at the counter. Okay, so just when it seemed like the story couldn't get any more bizarre, it took a very, very dark turn. The FBI, who by now are tapping Steve's phone, discovered that the plan wasn't just flawed, it was treacherous. Steve had hired a hitman to go down to Mexico and kill David Gunt. That huge flaw David had overlooked, it was about to become a fatal one. And that phone tap was the final nail in the coffin. Once the FBI arrested the wannabe hitman, he just confessed everything. He gave them David's exact location, the full story of the heist, and the names of every single person involved. The whole house of cards just came crashing down. After 5 months of patiently gathering all the evidence they could, the FBI had everything they needed. On March 1st, 1998, they made their move, and they brought this whole charade to a very dramatic end. In the end, the prison sentences really tell you everything you need to know about the portrayal at the heart of this crime. Steve Chambers, the so-called mastermind who planned to murder his partner, got a longer sentence than David Gant, the guy who actually took all the initial risk. Justice in this case wasn't just about the money, it was about the intent to kill. Now, the FBI did an impressive job, I gotta say. They recovered about 88% of the stolen cash. But that other 12%, nearly $2 million, had already vanished. It was squandered by the Chambers family on a very brief but incredibly lavish lifestyle. Years later, in a final, just cruel twist of irony, David Gaunt was hired as a consultant on the Hollywood movie about his own life. But by law, he couldn't be paid a single dime for it. Any money he would have made had to go towards paying back the cash that Steve Chambers had so recklessly spent. Just wow. So in the end, you have to ask yourself, what did they really gain? A few months of living large, followed by years in prison and a lifetime of debt. Their legacy isn't one of criminal genius, but of just comical incompetence. It's a pretty stark reminder that sometimes the biggest heist is the one you pull on yourself.